Welcome, the day is done. It is time now to let the noise of your world fade into silence. Find your most comfortable position, dim your lights, and allow your mind to quiet itself. Tonight, I invite you on a journey not of conquest, but of confinement. We are traveling to the heart of the Middle Kingdom, to a place no commoner could enter for 500 years. We are going to the Forbidden City. For the next few moments, simply relax, breathe, and let your imagination awaken. We are about to step into the golden robes of the Son of Heaven himself. If you enjoy these journeys into the past, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, so you never miss an odyssey. Now, close your eyes. The story is about to begin. It is the largest palace complex in the world, a city of 9,999 rooms, surrounded by a moat and a towering purple wall. For 5 centuries, it was the celestial center of the universe, a place where an empire of 100 million souls was ruled by a single man. This was the Forbidden City. To live here was to be a god on earth. Your every whim a command, your every word law. But to be emperor was also to be the most isolated man in existence. A prisoner in a gilded cage, watched by 10,000 eyes. To understand this paradox, you must live it. You are Juhijan, you are a child about to be named the Wanli emperor. You are the Son of Heaven, and you have just inherited the most glorious prison ever built. Your first memory is not of warmth or comfort, but of silence. A profound, absolute silence, broken only by the whisper of silk against marble floors. You are 3 years old, perhaps 4, and you stand in a courtyard so vast that the walls seem to curve with the horizon itself. The sky above is a perfect square of blue, framed by golden roof tiles that gleam like dragon scales in the sun. You do not run. You do not play. You stand perfectly still, as you have been taught, your small hands folded within the voluminous sleeves of your embroidered robe. The faces around you are a blur of painted masks and rigid expressions. Eunuchs in dark robes bow so low their foreheads touch the stone. Palace maids kneel with their eyes cast down, never daring to meet your gaze. Your wet nurse, the only person who has ever held you with anything resembling tenderness, keeps a careful distance now, her face composed in an expression of reverent fear. You are a prince of the Imperial house, 3rd son of the Long King Emperor, and even at this tender age, you understand that you are not like other children. You are not entirely human. The air is thick with incense, sandalwood and jasmine, myrrh and ambergris. The smoke rises in lazy spirals from bronze censers shaped like mythical beasts. The smell is so constant, so pervasive, that you will carry it with you for the rest of your life. Decades from now, in moments of stress or fear, you will catch a whiff of sandalwood and be transported instantly back to these early years. To this sensation of being watched, always watched, by invisible eyes. Your world is divided into colors and textures, rather than places and people. There is the forbidden yellow, the imperial yellow that only you and your father may wear. It is the color of the sun, of the center of the cosmos, and it marks you as separate from all other beings. Your robes are heavy with gold thread, with embroidered dragons that coil and twist across silk, so fine it seems woven from light itself. The weight of these garments is considerable, especially for a child. Your shoulders ache. Your neck grows tired from holding up the elaborate headdress you must wear for formal occasions. But you do not complain. Emperors do not complain. Your tutors begin their work early. You are brought each morning to a hall where ancient scholars, men with long white beards and eyes like polished stones, teach you the basics of written Chinese. The characters swim before your eyes, thousands upon thousands of them, each one a small world of meaning. You practice with a brush that seems too large for your small hand, forming clumsy strokes on paper that costs more than a peasant family would earn in a year. When you make a mistake, the tutor's face remains impassive, but you feel the weight of his disappointment like a physical thing. You are not permitted to be merely adequate. You are the dragon seed, and excellence is your birthright and your burden. You have no companions your own age. The other children in the palace, the sons and daughters of concubines and lesser nobles, are kept strictly away from you. You might contaminate them with your divine essence, or they might contaminate you with their mortality. Instead, your playmates are eunuchs, men who have been castrated to serve in the inner palace. They smile at you with mouths that never quite reach their eyes. They bring you toys, elaborate mechanical birds that sing when wound, miniature armies of jade soldiers, kites painted with phoenixes and tigers. But they handle these toys with such reverence, such careful ritual, that the joy is drained from them before they ever reach your hands. There is one eunuch, Fung Bao, who seems different from the others. A is Jonga, his face less weathered, And when he looks at you, there is something almost like kindness in his expression. He teaches you small rebellions, tiny moments of humanity in the midst of ritual. He shows you how to sneak an extra sweet cake during meals. He tells you stories, not the approved histories and moral tales of your tutors, but folk stories of fox spirits and brave peasants, tales that make you laugh. For these brief moments, you feel almost like a normal child, but even these moments are calculated. You will learn later. Fengbo is building loyalty, creating a bond that he will use to advance his position when you come to power. In the Forbidden City, nothing is ever truly given freely. Your mother is a distant figure, more concept than person. She was once a lowly palace maid, but your birth elevated her to the rank of Imperial consort. She loves you, you think, in the way that mothers love their sons, but that love is mediated through so many layers of protocol and ritual that it becomes almost abstract. You see her on appointed days, at appointed hours. You kowtow before her, touching your forehead to the ground 3 times, and she smiles down at you from her throne with a smile that seems painted on her face. She asks you questions about your studies, nods approvingly at your answers, and then you are dismissed. You long to climb into her lap, to feel her arms around you, to hear her whisper your name without the weight of titles attached. But this is not permitted. She is the consort. You are the prince. The distance between you is measured not in steps, but in cosmic order. The palace itself is your true parent, your true educator. You learn its rhythms before you learn to read. You wake when the first bronze bell rings, in the darkness before dawn. You hear the shuffle of feet, as thousands of servants begin their day, lighting lanterns, carrying water, preparing the endless meals that will be served throughout the complex. You learn to distinguish the different bells, each with its own tone and meaning. The bell for morning audiences, the bell for sacrificial rituals, the bell that announces the emperor's movement from one hall to another. The entire palace breathes and moves to these sounds, a vast organism with your father at its heart. You catch glimpses of your father, the lunking emperor, only occasionally. He is a pale, sickly man, addicted to the Taoist elixirs that promised immortality but deliver only mercury poisoning. When you are brought before him for formal inspections, you see the tremor in his hands, the yellow cast to his eyes. He looks at you as though trying to remember who you are, then nods vaguely and waves you away. You are his 3rd son, not the eldest, and there is no reason to believe you will ever be more than a decorative prince, married off to some noble family, living a life of comfortable irrelevance in some distant corner of the palace. Fate, however, has other plans. Your eldest brother, the crown prince, is a weak and sickly child. He coughs through the night, and the palace physicians shake their heads gravely when they emerge from his chambers. Your 2nd brother dies in infancy, a tragedy announced by the wailing of mourning women and the burning of spirit money. Suddenly, terrifyingly, you are the spare that might become the heir. The attention of the court shifts toward you. The lessons intensify. The scrutiny becomes unbearable. Every cough, every sneeze, every moment of childish inattention is noted and reported. Your health becomes a matter of state importance. You are fed special tonics, subjected to endless examinations by physicians who prod and poke at you while discussing your humors and energies as though you are not even present. You begin to understand, in the way that children understand such things without having words for them, that you are not a person but a vessel. You are the container for the imperial bloodline, the carrier of the mandate of heaven. Your body does not belong to you. Your life does not belong to you. You exist for the dynasty, for the empire, for the continuation of a cosmic order that stretches back through 3,000 years of history. This knowledge settles over you like the weight of your robes, constant and inescapable. At night, alone in your bedchamber, surrounded by guards who stand silent vigil outside your door, you sometimes weep. You weep quietly, pressing your face into silk pillows, because even your tears are not truly private. The eunuchs will inspect your pillows in the morning. If they are wet, reports will be made. The court will speculate about your emotional state, your fitness to rule, your strength of character, so you learn to cry without making sound, to grieve without expression, to feel loneliness so profound that it becomes a kind of numb. The Forbidden City, you are beginning to realize, is not named for those forbidden to enter. It is named for everything forbidden to those who live within. Forbidden to leave. Forbidden to love freely. Forbidden to show weakness or fear or simple human need. You are 5 years old, and you are learning to be a god. But gods, you are discovering, are terribly, terribly alone. The news comes in the 4th watch of the night, when the world is at its darkest and most still. You are 9 years old, dreaming fitfully of gardens you have never seen and friends you have never had, when Feng Bao shakes you awake. His face is grave in the lamplight, and for once there is no calculation in his eyes, only genuine solemnity. The Emperor is dead. Your father has finally succumbed to the poisons he has been ingesting for years. The mercury and lead and arsenic that Taoist alchemists promised would grant immortality, but instead delivered only madness and death. You are now, in the eyes of heaven and earth, the son of heaven himself. You do not feel different. You feel small and cold and confused. You want to ask Feng Bao what this means, what you are supposed to do, whether you can go back to sleep and deal with this in the morning, but his face tells you that childhood, that fleeting and constrained thing you have known, is now completely over. You rise from your bed, and a swarm of eunuchs descends upon you, stripping away your sleeping robes and beginning the long process of transformation. The dressing ceremony takes 4 hours. You stand motionless as layer after layer of clothing is added to your body. First, the innermost robe of white silk, pure and clean. Then the middle robes of increasing formality, each one heavier than the last. Then the outermost robe, the dragon robe, made of silk so precious that a single thread could feed a family for a month. It is deep yellow, the forbidden yellow, and embroidered across every inch of its surface are dragons, 9-clawed dragons that writhe and coil in clouds and waves. The symbolism is explicit. You are the dragon. You are the storm. You are the bringer of rain and the voice of heaven. The robe weighs as much as a small child. Your shoulders sag under the burden, but eunuchs on either side support you, their hands under your elbows, bearing some of the weight. Then comes the headdress, Timian, Guan, a black lacquered hat, from which hang strings of jade beads that fall before your face like a curtain. You can see the world only through this curtain of swaying jade. Everything slightly obscured, slightly unreal. This too is symbolic. The Emperor does not look directly upon his subjects, lest his divine gaze be too much for them to bear. You are given a jade tablet to hold, the Hu, which you must grip with both hands and hold before your chest throughout the ceremony. Your fingers ache around it. You are told not to drop it, not to let it slip, for it represents your authority and your connection to the ancestors. You nod your understanding, but inside you are screaming. You are 9 years old. You want your mother. You want to run away. You want to wake up from this nightmare and find that it was all some elaborate mistake. But there is no mistake. The doors to your chamber open, and you are led out into the pre-dawn darkness of the Forbidden City. The massive complex has been transformed overnight. Every surface is hung with white, the color of morning. Lanterns glow with pale light, casting long shadows across the courtyards, and the people, thousands upon thousands of people, line the walkways and fill the courtyards, all of them in mourning white, all of them prostrate on the ground. You walk forward, guided by Feng Bao and 2 high-ranking eunuchs, whose names you do not know. You walk through the gate of supreme harmony, under the watchful gaze of guardian lions whose stone eyes seem to follow your progress. You walk across courtyards, so vast they could hold entire villages, and with every step, the people around you press their foreheads to the ground, and intone in a low, rumbling chorus, 10,000 years, 10,000 years, 10,000,000 years. This is your greeting now, your no name. Wansui, the Eternal One, the one who will live forever. The Hall of Supreme Harmony looms before you, the largest wooden structure in China, perhaps in the world. Its roof rises in sweeping curves toward the lightning sky, covered in yellow tiles that seem to capture and hold the first rays of dawn. You climb the marble stairs, each step an effort under the weight of your robes, and enter the hall. The interior is vast and dim, lit by hundreds of red lanterns that cast everything in a warm, hellish glow. At the far end, on a raised platform, sits the dragon throne. It is carved from a single piece of dark wood and inlaid with gold and mother of pearl. It is both magnificent and terrifying, less a piece of furniture than an altar. Grand Secretary Zheng Zhuzhang waits beside the throne. He is a tall man with a severe face and eyes that seem to look through you rather than at you. He is the most powerful man in the empire, the chief minister who has effectively run the government during your father's illness. He boasts you the shallowest bow of respect from superior to inferior, and you understand the message. He acknowledges your divine status, but he is still the master here. You are the symbol. He is the substance. The ceremony begins. Officials file in, arranged by rank and department. each one approaching the throne to perform the 3 kneeling and 9 prostrations required in the presence of the emperor. You sit on the throne, your feet not quite reaching the footrest, your small body dwarfed by the massive chair. The jade beads of your headdress sway and click together with every tiny movement. The jade tablet grows slippery in your sweating hands, and still they come, wave after wave of officials, all in perfect formation, all performing the exact same ritual. Zhang Zhuzhang reads the proclamation in a voice that echoes through the hall. You are declared the Wanli Emperor, the 10th Emperor of the Ming Dynasty, ruler of all under heaven, the Son of Heaven himself, mediator between the celestial realm and the mortal world. The words wash over you without meaning. You understand them intellectually. You have been taught their significance in your studies, but they do not connect to the small, frightened boy sitting on this impossible throne. How can you be the voice of heaven? How can you mediate between gods and men? You still sometimes wet your bed at night. The ceremony continues for hours. There are prayers and declarations, the burning of incense, the presentation of the imperial seals that bear your reign name. You are given your Iran name, Wanli, which means 10,000 calendars, a wish for a long and prosperous reign. You will rule under this name for the next 48 years, the longest reign of any Ming emperor, but you will spend most of those years wishing you had never been born into this golden prison. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the heat in the hall becomes oppressive. Sweat runs down your back beneath the layers of silk. Your legs cramp from sitting motionless for so long. Your arms shake with the effort of holding the jade tablet, but you do not move. You do not speak. You sit as you have been instructed, projecting an image of divine serenity while inside you are crumbling. This is your first lesson in the true nature of imperial power. It is not about what you feel or what you want. It is about what you project, what you symbolize. You are no longer Zhu Hizhang. You are the Wanli Emperor, and the Wanli Emperor does not have feelings. When the ceremony finally ends, and you are led back to your chambers, you collapse. Eunuchs strip away the heavy robes and bathe you in water scented with chrysanthemum. Your mother comes to you, tears streaming down her face. She has been elevated to the rank of Empress Dowager, the most powerful woman in the empire. She holds you, finally, without the barrier of protocol, and you sob into her shoulder like the child you still are. She whispers reassurances, tells you that you will grow into this role, that you will become a great emperor like your ancestors. But you can hear the fear in her voice. She knows, as you are beginning to know, that you have been given a burden no human being should have to carry. That night, you lie awake in the emperor's private quarters, a suite of rooms even more luxurious and more isolating than your previous chambers. The bed is enormous, carved with dragons and phoenixes, hung with curtains of the finest silk, but it feels like a tomb. You are surrounded by guards, by eunuchs sleeping in antechambers, by the weight of 1,000 years of history pressing down on you. You are the most powerful person in the most powerful empire on earth, and you have never felt more powerless, more trapped, more utterly alone. Zhang Zhuzhang comes to you the morning after your coronation, and your real education begins. If your childhood tutors were strict, Zhang is merciless. He is 51 years old, at the height of his intellectual and political powers, and he has a vision for reforming the empire that requires a compliant emperor who will not interfere with his policies. You, a 9-year-old boy, are the perfect tool for his purposes. He intends to shape you, to mold you, to turn you into the kind of ruler he believes China needs. What he does not realize, what he will never understand, is that in controlling you so completely, he is planting the seeds of resentment that will eventually destroy his legacy. Your day now begins at the 4th watch, around 4 in the morning. You are woken by eunuchs, who dress you quickly in study robes, less formal than the full imperial regalia, but still heavy with symbolism. You are brought to the Hall of Literary Profundity, a smaller hall within the palace complex that serves as your classroom. Zhang Zhuzhang waits for you there, along with 2 other tutors, lesser scholars who assist him but never dared to contradict him. You bow to them, they bow to you, and then the performance of mutual respect is over. You are a student, and Zhang is determined to be the strictest teacher in the empire's history. The curriculum is punishing. You study the 4 books and 5 classics, the foundational texts of Confucian philosophy. You memorize passages that run for pages, ancient wisdom about the proper relationships between ruler and subject, father and son, husband and wife. You learn that the emperor is not a tyrant but a moral exemplar, that your primary duty is not to exercise power but to embody virtue. You'll learn that the mandate of heaven is not a blank check for imperial whims, but a conditional grant that can be revoked if you fail in your moral duties. Heaven Zheng tells you again and again does not grant power to tyrants. It grants power to the virtuous, and virtue requires discipline, study, and above all, listening to your wise ministers. Zheng's teaching method is relentless questioning. He asks you to interpret passages from the classics, then picks apart your answers with surgical precision. He points out logical flaws, insufficient understanding, failure to grasp deeper meanings. You are 9, then 10, then 11 years old, and you are being held to a standard that would challenge a mature scholar. When you falter, when you cannot answer, Zheng's face grows stern. He does not shout. He does not need to. His disappointment is punishment enough. You learn to dread that look, that slight narrowing of his eyes that tells you that you have failed yet again to meet his impossible standards. But the Confucian classics are only part of your education. Zheng also insists that you understand history, the rise and fall of dynasties, the mistakes of past. You study the Qin Dynasty, unified China, and then collapsed, after only 15 years because its emperor was a tyrant who burned books and buried scholars. You study the Ming Dynasty, the golden age of Chinese civilization, brought low by imperial weakness and the Lushan rebellion. You study the Song Dynasty, prosperous and cultured but ultimately conquered by foreign invaders, because its emperors neglected military affairs. Every lesson is a warning, every historical anecdote a cautionary tale. Do not be cruel like Qin Shi Huang. Do not be weak like the late Emperor. Do not neglect defense like the Song. Be wise, be virtuous, be balanced. In other words, be imposible. Zheng controls every aspect of your life. He sets your schedule, determines your meals, chooses your clothing, even decides when you may visit your mother. He argues that this is necessary, that the young emperor must not be corrupted by the indulgences of palace life, by the flattery of eunuchs and the machinations of palace women. You must remain pure, focused, dedicated to your studies and your duties. In practice, this means you have no freedom whatsoever. You wake when Zheng decrees. You study what Zheng selects. You eat what Zheng approves. You go to sleep when Zheng determines the day is over. You are the emperor, but Zheng is your jailer. There are brief respites in this grueling routine. Once every 10 days, Zheng permits you to have a day of reduced study, what he calls a day of rest, but which is really just a day with slightly fewer hours of lessons. On these days, you are allowed to practice calligraphy for pleasure rather than for instruction, to paint, to compose poetry. You discover that you have some talent for these arts. Your brushwork is elegant. Your poems show sensitivity and depth. For a few hours, you feel almost human, almost yourself. But then the next day dawns, and you are back in the hall of literary profundity, back under Zheng's merciless scrutiny. As you grow older, Zheng begins to bring you into the actual governance of the empire. You sit in on audiences with high officials. You read memorials from provincial governors, reports of harvests and taxes, petitions for relief from droughts and floods. Zheng explains the issues to you, outlines the various positions, then tells you what decision you should make. You announce this decision, and it is implemented immediately. The officials bow and thank you for your wisdom. But you know, and they know, and Zheng knows, that these are not your decisions. You are a puppet, mouthing words that Zheng has written for you. This arrangement galls you more with each passing year. You are 13, 14, 15 years old. You are approaching manhood. You are the emperor, yet you have less autonomy than a peasant child in the countryside. The peasant child can choose to play or work, can speak freely, can even rebel against his parents. You can do none of these things. Every word you speak is rehearsed. Every action is choreographed. Even your thoughts, you sometimes fear, are not entirely your own. So thoroughly as Zheng filled your mind with Confucian precepts and historical examples, you begin to notice the power dynamics more clearly. Zheng is not just your teacher. He is the de facto ruler of the empire. He has placed his allies in every important position. He has ruthlessly purged his opponents, sending them into exile or forcing them into retirement. The entire governmental apparatus runs according to his design. And it runs remarkably well, you must admit. Under Zheng's leadership, the empire is prosperous. Taxes are collected efficiently. The military is strong. The borders are secure. Public works are completed on time and under budget. Zheng is, by any objective measure, a brilliant administrator, but his very competence makes your own irrelevance even more painful. You develop a complicated relationship with this man who controls your life. On one level, you respect him. He is clearly intelligent, clearly dedicated to the empire's welfare. His policies are sound, His reforms are necessary. He works tirelessly, often staying up long past midnight to review documents and draft proposals. He has given his entire life to the service of the state. On another level, you hate him. You hate his control, his condescension, his absolute certainty that he knows better than you about everything. You hate that he treats you as an eternal student rather than as the sovereign. You hate that when he looks at you, he does not see the Son of Heaven but a boy who still needs constant supervision. Your mother, the Empress Dowager, sees your frustration but can do nothing, while Jiang Zhujiang controls the outer court, the world of governance and state affairs. There is another realm of power within the Forbidden City that operates according to different rules. This is the inner court, the residential section of the palace, and it is a world dominated by women and eunuchs. Here, away from the formal audiences and Confucian lectures, a different kind of education is taking place. You are learning the subtle art of palace intrigue, the deadly game of whispered words and hidden daggers. The inner court is a vast warren of courtyards and pavilions, gardens and halls, all arranged according to strict hierarchies. At the very center is the Palace of Heavenly Purity, your primary residence, a place so sacred that even high officials may not enter without your explicit permission. Surrounding this are the quarters of the Empress, your formal wife, and the various consorts and concubines who make up your household. Beyond these are the residences of your mother, the Empress Dowager, and other members of the Imperial family. The entire complex is serviced by thousands of palace maids and hundreds of eunuchs, all living in a state of enforced celibacy, all competing for favor and position in this closed world. Your Empress is a girl named Wang, selected for you when you were 14 years old, through an elaborate process that involved examining candidates from all the most prominent families in the empire. She is beautiful in the classical manner, with pale skin and delicate features, skilled in music and needlework, and all the arts deemed appropriate for an empress. But there is no warmth between you. Your marriage is a political arrangement, a joining of lineages, and the relationship is conducted with painful formality. You visit her chambers on the prescribed nights, perform your conjugal duties with mechanical precision, and then return to your own quarters. She bows to you. You nod to her. Words are exchanged that mean nothing. You are husband and wife, but you are strangers. The concubines are a different matter. You have dozens of them, young women selected for their beauty and brought into the palace to serve your pleasure. The system is designed to prevent any one woman from gaining too much influence. You are supposed to rotate among them according to a schedule, preventing emotional attachments that might compromise your judgment or lead to favoritism. But you are a young man, not a machine, and despite all the regulations and precautions, you develop preferences. There is one woman who captures your heart, almost from the first moment you see her. Her name is Zhang, and she is different from the others. She is intelligent, quick-witted, skilled in conversation, as well as in the more intimate arts. When you visit her chambers, you find yourself staying longer than protocol dictates, talking with her about things you can discuss with no one else. She listens to your frustrations about Jiang Zhujiang, your resentment at being controlled, your dreams of ruling independently. She does not lecture you or correct you. She simply listens, and occasionally offers observations that are surprisingly astute. In her presence, you feel like a person rather than an imperial symbol. Your mother, the Empress Dowager, watches your growing attachment to Lady Zhang with concern. She understands the dangers of imperial favoritism, how a beloved concubine can become a power center, manipulating the emperor and interfering in state affairs. Chinese history is full of such cautionary tales, emperors brought low by their love for unsuitable women. She tries to counsel you toward moderation, toward treating all your women with equal regard. But you are young and in love, perhaps the only real love you will ever experience in your constrained life, and you reject her advice. You begin spending more and more time in Lady Zhang's quarters, neglecting your other consorts, even neglecting your empress. The palace women form factions around this rivalry. Some align with the empress, supporting the legitimate wife and the principle of proper hierarchy. Others align with Lady Zhang, seeing her as the rising power. These factions compete through 1,000 small acts of sabotage and advancement. A word dropped in the right ear, a gift presented at the opportune moment, a rumor carefully cultivated. The eunuchs, who serve as intermediaries between the women's quarters and the outside world, play both sides, profiting from the conflict. The eunuchs themselves are a fascinating and disturbing presence in your life. They are men who have been castrated, usually as boys, in order to serve in the inner court without posing any threat to the imperial bloodline. The operation is brutal and dangerous. Many boys die from infection or blood loss, but for those who survive and are accepted into palace service it offers opportunities that would otherwise be unimaginable for someone of their low social class. A clever eunuch can rise to positions of tremendous power, controlling access to the emperor, managing imperial finances, even leading military campaigns. Feng Gua, who has been with you since childhood, is now one of the most powerful men in the empire. As director of ceremonial, he oversees all the eunuchs in the palace, a position that gives him enormous influence. He controls your daily schedule, decides who gets an audience, manages the flow of information to and from you. He is also fabulously wealthy, having accumulated a fortune through gifts, bribes, and various corrupt schemes. Zhong Zhuzheng despises him but tolerates him because Feng Bao is useful. The eunuch supports Zhang's policies, helps implement his reforms, and most importantly, keeps you manageable. But there are other eunuchs who resent Feng Bao as Tamanan-san, who see, in your growing resentment of Zhong Zhuzheng, an opportunity to advance their own positions. They whisper to you about Feng Bao's corruption, his disrespect, his secret mockery of imperial authority. They offer themselves as more loyal servants, more dedicated to your true interests. You listen to these whispers with growing interest. You are beginning to understand that power in the Forbidden City is not just about formal authority, but about controlling the flow of information, about having loyal servants in key positions, about building networks of obligation and favor. This is a kind of power that Zhong Zhuzheng, for all his brilliance, does not fully appreciate because it operates outside the Confucian system of merit and virtue. Your days in the inner court follow their own rhythm, distinct from the rigid schedule of study and audiences that Zhang imposes on you. You awake latte, by his standards, at the 5th watch, around 6 in the morning. After breakfast, on days when you are not required to attend audiences or study sessions, you have a few hours of relative freedom. You might practice calligraphy in your private studio, grinding ink and forming characters on silk or paper. This is one of the few activities that gives you genuine pleasure. There is something meditative about the process. The focus required to form each stroke correctly, the way a well-executed character seems to capture something essential about meaning and form. You have been trained in several calligraphic styles, from the austere clerical script to the flowing cursive hand. Your work is quite good, some say excellent, though you never know whether people are being honest or simply flattering the emperor. Sometimes you walk in the imperial gardens, though even this simple pleasure is constrained by protocol. You cannot simply stroll wherever you please. Eunuchs scout the path ahead, ensuring that no unauthorized person is present. Guards follow, at a discreet distance. Servants carry portable chairs in case you wish the rest. The spontaneity is drained from the experience. Still, the gardens are beautiful, carefully designed landscapes of rocks and water, pavilions and bridges, ancient trees and flowering shrubs. In spring, the gardens explode with color, plum blossoms and peonies, cherry blossoms and magnolias. In autumn, the leaves turn gold and red, and the air carries the scent of chrysanthemums. These moments of natural beauty are among the few times you feel something approaching peace. The afternoons are often devoted to religious observances. Despite the Confucian emphasis of your official education, the inner court is deeply influenced by Taoism and Buddhism. There are temples and shrines scattered throughout the complex, places where incense is burned and prayers offered to various deities and ancestors. Your mother is particularly devout, and she encourages you to make regular offerings and to consult with Taoist priests about auspicious dates for important decisions. You find these rituals somewhat tedious, but you recognize their political importance. The common people believe that the emperor is the intermediary between heaven and earth, and maintaining proper religious observances is part of your job. There are also the entertainments, carefully curated diversions designed to occupy your time without allowing you to develop any dangerous opera performances in the palace theater, with elaborately costumed actors performing classical dramas, acrobats, and jugglers, and magicians who perform feats of skill and illusion, musicians playing ancient instruments, the haunting sounds of the guqin and the peep. You watch these performances from a private box, separated from the performers by screens and distance. Sometimes Lady Zhang joins you, and you hold hands in the darkness. This small intimacy, one of the few genuine human connections in your life. The evenings are for reading, though not the kind of reading Zhong Zhuzheng prescribes. In your private chambers, away from your tutors, you read histories and poetry, travel accounts, and even some fiction. Though novels are considered vulgar by Confucian standards, you are particularly fascinated by accounts of the wider world, of foreign lands beyond China's borders. You read about the tribute missions from Korea and Vietnam, from the kingdoms of Southeast Asia. You read Marco Polo's description of China, translated into Chinese and full of amusing exaggerations. You read Jesuit, missionary reports about Europe, about the kingdoms and cities there, about their strange customs and technologies. These accounts make you aware of how large the world is and how small your own world has become. At night, you visit your empress or one of your concubines, usually Lady Zheng. These visits are not entirely private. Eunuchs wait outside the chamber, noting the time of your arrival and departure. If you spend the night, they record this as well. If a woman becomes pregnant, these records will be consulted to confirm the child's legitimacy. Even your most intimate moments are observed, recorded, made part of the historical record. Future generations will read about your sexual habits, will analyze patterns to draw conclusions about your character and governance. Nothing is truly private. Nothing is truly yours alone. The inner court has its own justice system, its own hierarchy of rewards and punishments. A palace maid who displeases a consort might be beaten or sent to work in the laundries, a far harsher assignment than serving in the residential quarters. A eunuch who steals might be executed, or if his crime is minor, merely demoted and reassigned to less prestigious duties. You hear about these matters only in the most general terms. The daily administration of the inner court is handled by the senior eunuchs and palace ladies, creating a bureaucracy within a bureaucracy. You are the nominal head of this world, but much of it functions without your knowledge or consent. There are darker undercurrents to life in the inner court, whispers of things that disturb your sleep. Stories of palace maids who have been found dead, officially declared suicides, but rumored to have been murdered by jealous rivals. Tales of eunuchs who have disappeared, victims of internal power struggles. Accounts of babies who died in infancy, their deaths perhaps not as natural as officially reported. The inner court is a world of women and castrated men, people who have no outlet for ambition except through manipulation and intrigue. The stakes are incredibly high. A woman who bears the emperor a son might see her child become the next emperor, elevating her to the pinnacle of power. A eunuch who gains the emperor's trust might accumulate wealth and influence beyond measure. These possibilities drive people to desperate acts. You try not to think too much about these darker aspects of palace life. You tell yourself that these are exceptions, that most of the people serving you are loyal and honest. But you cannot entirely ignore the reality. You are surrounded by people who have been forced into this life through poverty or desperation, people who have given up their families and their futures for a chance at advancement. They smile at you and bow to you and call you by your divine titles. But what do they really think? Do they hate you? Do they pity you? Do they see you as a god or as just another prisoner of this system, albeit a prisoner in golden chains? Your mother tries to shield you from the worst of the palace intrigues, but she is also part of this system. As Empress Dowager, she wields considerable power, particularly in matters concerning the inner court. She makes decisions about which women should be promoted to higher ranks, which eunuchs should be given positions of authority, how the imperial household budget. The news reaches you on a gray morning in the 6th month of the 10th year of your reign. You are 20 years old, reviewing memorials in your study when Feng Bo enters with an expression you have never seen on his face before. It is a mixture of genuine sorrow and poorly concealed excitement. Zheng Zhuzheng is dead. The Grand Secretary, the man who has controlled your life since you were 9 years old, has finally succumbed to the illness that has been consuming him for months. He died at his home, surrounded by his family, after suffering a massive seizure. He was 58 years old. You sit very still when you hear this news. You should feel something, you think. Grief. Perhaps, for the man who educated you and guided the empire so ably. Relief. Certainly, that you are finally free from his control. But what you feel is a strange numbness, as though some essential part of you has been held in suspension for so long that it cannot immediately resume normal function. You dismiss Feng Bo and sit alone in your study, staring at nothing, trying to understand what this moment means. The official mourning is elaborate and sincere. Zheng was respected, even revered, by many in the government. His economic reforms have filled the treasury. His military policies have secured the borders. His administrative innovations have made the bureaucracy more efficient. Memorials pour in from across the empire, praising his wisdom and dedication. The court goes into mourning. You issue a decree honoring his service, granting his family wealth and titles, ensuring that his legacy will be remembered forever. You say all the right things, perform all the expected rituals, and beneath this official performance, you begin to plan your revenge. It starts slowly, almost Officials who were closest to Zheng began to find themselves reassigned to distant posts. Men who opposed Zheng's policies are suddenly recalled from retirement and given important positions. You begin to ask questions about Zheng's administration. probing inquiries about how certain decisions were made, about the sources of his family's wealth. What you discover, or what you allow yourself to believe you have discovered, is evidence of corruption on a massive scale. Zhang Zhuzhang, it turned out, was not the selfless servant he appeared to be. He accumulated enormous wealth during his years in power. He accepted gifts from officials seeking advancement. He placed his sons in lucrative positions. He built a mansion in his home province that rivals some imperial palaces in its splendor. His family lives in luxury that seems inappropriate for even the highest skill. All of this was overlooked during his lifetime because of his competence and your own powerlessness. But now he is dead, and you are emperor in fact, as well as name, and old sins can be revisited. The eunuchs, particularly Feng Bao, feed your growing anger. They bring you reports of Zhang's arrogance, how he dismissed imperial authority, how he treated you as a child who needed constant supervision. They remind you of every humiliation, every moment when Zhang corrected you, or overruled you, or made it clear that he, not you, was the real power in the empire. They tell you that the officials still loyal to Zhang's faction are plotting against you, planning to constrain your authority just as Zhang did. These reports may be true, or they may be exaggerations designed to manipulate you, but they confirm what you want to believe, that Zhang was not a loyal minister, but a usurper who stole your authority. 18 months after Zhang's death, you make your move. You issue a decree stripping Zhang Zhuzhang of all his honors and titles. You declare that he was corrupt, that he abused his position, that he disrespected imperial authority. You order his family's property confiscated, his sons arrested and interrogated. The eldest son, unable to bear the disgrace, commits suicide. The rest of the family is impoverished and exiled. Officials who protest this treatment are dismissed or punished. Within weeks, Zhang's carefully built political network is dismantled, and his legacy is in ruins. The scholar official class is shocked by your actions. Zhang was one of their own, a brilliant examination candidate who rose through merit to the highest position in the government. The attack on his legacy seems like an attack on the entire system of Confucian governance. Memorials flood in, hundreds of them, arguing that you are being unjust, that you are being influenced by eunuchs and palace women rather than by virtuous principle. They remind you that sage emperors listen to criticism and correct their errors. They quote the classics at you, passages Zhang himself taught you about the importance of honoring worthy ministers. You ignore them. For the first time in your life, you exercise absolute power, and it is intoxicating. These officials who presume to lecture you, to constrain you with their endless moral sermons and historical precedents, now bow before your anger. You have discovered something that Zhang's Confucian education tried to hide from you. You are not bound by tradition or moral principle or the opinion of scholars. You are the son of heaven. Your will is law, and if they do not like it, they can suffer the same fate as Zhang's family. But there is a cost to this assertion of power, though you do not fully recognize it yet. The relationship between emperor and bureaucracy is based on a delicate balance. The emperor needs the officials to actually govern the empire. He cannot read every memorial, make every decision, oversee every province himself. The officials, in turn, need the emperor to legitimize their authority and give direction to policy. When this relationship works well, as it did under Zhang's administration, the empire prospers. When it breaks down, when emperor and bureaucracy are at odds, everything becomes more difficult. By destroying Zhang's legacy, you signal to the bureaucracy that loyalty and competence are not enough. You can be the most capable minister in the empire. You can dedicate your entire life to the state. And still, you might end up disgraced and your family ruined if you displease the emperor. This creates fear, and fear creates caution. Officials begin to hesitate before offering honest advice. They become more concerned with pleasing you than with good governance. The culture of the court begins to shift, becoming less about merit and more about favoritism. You also empower the eunuchs by destroying Zhang. Feng Bo and his faction have demonstrated their usefulness to you. They supported your attack on Zhang, provided the information you needed, helped you bypass the normal bureaucratic channels. In return, you give them more power, more access, more opportunities for enrichment. The eunuchs have always been present in Chinese courts, but traditionally, they have been kept subordinate to the scholar. Now you are elevating them, using them as a counterweight to the bureaucracy. For the next decade, you rule with energy and attention. The first flush of absolute power has not yet faded into boredom or resentment. You are young, vigorous, determined to prove that you can be a great emperor without Zhang Zhuzhang controlling your every move, and for a time, it seems that you will succeed. These are the glory years of your reign, the years when the Wanli era looks like it might become one of the great periods of Chinese history. You begin attending morning audiences regularly, rising before dawn to meet with your ministers in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. These sessions are still highly officials presenting memorials and recommendations in formal language. You responding with carefully considered pronouncements, but there is a difference now. The decisions are yours. You read the memorials yourself, question the officials, debate policy options. You are not brilliant like Zhang was, but you are competent and conscientious. You take your duties seriously. The empire in these years is prosperous and stable. The population is growing, reaching perhaps 150 million people, making China by far the most populous country in the world. Agriculture is productive, benefiting from Zhang's earlier reforms, even if you will not acknowledge his contribution. New crops from the Americas, corn and sweet potatoes, and peanuts, are being adopted and helping to feed the growing population. Trade is flourishing, both internal commerce along the Grand Canal and external trade with Southeast Asia, and even, through intermediaries, with Europe. The treasury is full, swollen with tax revenues. From this prosperous economy, you use this wealth to fund a number of ambitious projects. You repair and extend the Great Wall in the north, strengthening defenses against Mongol raiders. You rebuild portions of the Grand Canal, ensuring the smooth flow of grain from the south to Beijing. You renovate temples and palaces, including extensive work on the Forbidden City itself. You commission magnificent works of art, porcelain and jade, paintings and calligraphy, adding to the Imperial collection. The Wanli reign becomes synonymous with luxury and refinement, and you take pride in this cultural flowering. Your armies achieve significant victories on the frontiers. When Japanese forces invade Korea, your tributary state, you dispatch a massive expeditionary force to push them back. The war drags on for years and costs a fortune, but ultimately you are successful. The Japanese withdraw. Korea remains in the Chinese sphere of influence, and you are hailed as a defender of the tributary system. You also conduct successful campaigns in the southwest, suppressing rebellions and extending Chinese control over previously autonomous regions. These military successes enhance your prestige and seem to confirm the mandate of heaven. The court in these years is a magnificent spectacle. You host elaborate banquets for the highest officials and visiting dignitaries, feasts that feature dozens of courses and last for hours. Entertainments are provided, opera and dance, acrobatics and music. You wear your most magnificent robes for these occasions, dragon robes encrusted with gold thread and pearls, so heavy that you can barely move. You sit on the dragon throne, elevated above your guests, a living symbol of power and majesty. Foreign envoys bow before you, presenting tribute from their kingdoms. Everyone agrees that you are a great emperor, that the empire is fortunate to have such a wise and capable ruler. You expand your personal household during this period, taking more concubines and fathering numerous children. Lady Zheng remains your favorite, and she bears you 3 sons, including one, Zhu Chen, who becomes the center of your affections. He is a bright, charming boy, and you love him more than you ever thought possible. When you hold him, when you play with him in the palace gardens, you feel something you have rarely felt in your constrained life. Pure, uncomplicated joy. You begin to imagine him as your heir, the next emperor, despite the fact that you already have a son by your empress, Zhu Chenglue, who by law and tradition should be the crown prince. Your Empress Wang has given you a son, but you feel no warmth toward either mother or child. The boy, Kang Luo, is a quiet, awkward child who seems to disappoint you without doing anything particularly wrong. Perhaps it is unfair, but you cannot help comparing him to Lady Zheng's son, Changshun, who is lively and clever. You begin to spend less and less time with your empress, and more time in Lady Zheng's quarters. The palace divides into factions supporting the 2 women and their sons, and a tension builds that will eventually tear the court apart. But in these early years, you do not see the danger. You are the emperor. Surely you can decide who your heir will be. The relationship with your mother during this period is complex. She is proud of your accomplishments, pleased to see you ruling actively and competently. But she is also concerned about your growing attachment to Lady Zheng and your apparent determination to bypass the legitimate heir. She tries to counsel you toward propriety, reminding you of the importance of following established succession practices. But you are less willing to listen to her advice now than you were as a child. You have tasted power, and you have discovered that you enjoy it. You do not want to be constrained, not by Confucian principles, not by tradition, not even by your mother's well-meaning guidance. Feng Bo and the other senior eunuchs prosper greatly during these years. You reward them for their loyalty during the conflict with Zhang Jujian's faction, giving them positions of authority and opportunities to enrich themselves. Feng Bo becomes fabulously wealthy, rivaling the richest nobles in the empire. He builds mansions, collects art, lives a life of luxury that would have been unimaginable for a castrated servant boy decades earlier. You tell yourself that this is fine, that these men deserve to be rewarded for their service. But their growing wealth and power creates resentment among the who see the eunuchs as corrupt parasites undermining Confucian governance. You also begin to indulge your own tastes for luxury and collecting. You commission the construction of new palace buildings, structures of. You wake before dawn, as you have every day for years now, to the sound of eunuchs moving softly in the outer chamber. They do not speak, not yet. Even their footsteps are carefully muted, soft slippers on marble floors. The darkness is absolute. No light penetrates the thick curtains of your bed, and you lie there for a moment, suspended between sleep and waking, trying to hold on to whatever dream was fading from your mind. But there is no reprieve. The day has begun, and you are the emperor, and the machinery of ritual must turn. The curtains part. A eunuch bows his face, barely visible, in the light of the single candle he carries. He murmurs the morning greeting, the same words every morning, informing you of the hour and the weather and the schedule of rituals to come. You rise from the bed, your body stiff from sleep, and stand naked while other eunuchs enter with basins of warm water. They wash you with silk cloths, carefully, thoroughly, attending to every part of your body with an intimacy that should be embarrassing but has long since become merely routine. They wash your face and neck, your arms and chest, your legs and feet. They trim your fingernails and toenails, collect the clippings in a jade box that will be examined later for signs of illness. Nothing that comes from your body is waste. Everything is a potential omen, a clue about your health, and thus about the health of the empire itself. The dressing ceremony begins. You stand with your arms outstretched, while layer after layer of clothing is added. First, the innermost garments, white silk against your skin. Then the middle robes, progressively more elaborate. Then the outer robe, chosen from dozens of options depending on the day's ceremonies. Today, it is a dragon robe of Imperial Yela, embroidered with 9 5-clawed dragons, the symbol of your absolute authority. The robe weighs perhaps 20 pounds. Your shoulders already ache from its weight, and the day has barely begun. The headdress comes next, a formal mianguan with its curtain of jade beads. The beads click softly as the eunuchs secure it to your hair, which has been carefully oiled and arranged. You can see the world only through this curtain of jade, everything slightly obscured, slightly unreal. You have worn this headdress hundreds of times, but it always takes a moment to adjust to the altered perception, the way it isolates you, even as you stand among dozens of people. You are given the jade tablet to hold, the symbol of imperial authority, and then you are ready. The eunuchs bow and withdraw, walking backwards so as not to turn their backs on you. You follow them out of your private chamber, through the palace of heavenly purity, into the cold morning air of the courtyard. It is still dark, the sky just beginning to lighten in the east. Stars are visible overhead, though the layout of the Forbidden City is such that you can see only a square of sky, framed by roof tiles. You have lived here for 30 years, and you have never seen the horizon. The procession to the Hall of Supreme Harmony takes 15 minutes. You walk slowly, partly because of the weight of your robes, and partly because imperial dignity requires measured movement. Eunuchs walk ahead of you, calling out your approach so that everyone in your path can prostrate themselves before you arrive. You pass through gate after gate, courtyard after courtyard, each one exactly like the last, an endless repetition of marble and red pillars and golden roof tiles. By the time you reach the Hall of Supreme Harmony, your feet ache and sweat runs down your back beneath the silk. The morning audience is the central ritual of imperial governance, and it has been conducted in essentially the same way for centuries. You ascend to the dragon throne, a long climb up marble stairs, and take your seat. The throne is hard and uncomfortable, designed for symbolic power rather than physical ease. Below you, arranged in precise formations, stand hundreds of officials, organized by rank and department. They wear formal robes and hats, their faces masks of proper decorum. The hall is silent, except for the soft sound of breathing and the occasional rustle of silk. The master of ceremonies calls the audience to order. The officials perform the 3 kneelings and 9 prostrations, a ritual that takes several minutes. You sit motionless, watching jade beads sway before your face, while hundreds of men touch their foreheads to the floor to honor you. When Te Rai said the presentations begin, officials approach one by one, presenting memorials that have been approved in advance. They recite formal requests and recommendations, their voices echoing in the vast hall. You respond with carefully prepared statements, words drafted by secretaries and approved by ministers, pronouncements that carry the weight of imperial authority. A governor requests permission to construct a new granary. You grant it. A minister recommends the appointment of a new magistrate. You approve it. A military commander reports on border conditions. You praise his vigilance. The content matters less than the form. What is important is that these rituals are performed, that the proper relationship between emperor and bureaucracy is enacted and reaffirmed. This is not governance but theater, and you are the lead actor in a play that has been running for centuries. The audience lasts 3 hours. You sit without moving, your body growing numb, your mind wandering. You think about Lady Zhang, about her smile and her laugh. You think about your children, wondering what they are doing right now. You think about nothing at all, falling into a kind of trance where time seems to stop. Finally, the last official makes his presentation, performs his obeisance, and withdraws. The master of ceremonies announces the end of the audience. You rise from the throne, your legs stiff, and begin the long walk back to your quarters. Breakfast is waiting when you return to the palace of heavenly purity. The meal has been prepared by the Imperial kitchen, a vast operation employing hundreds of cooks and assistants. The food is laid out on multiple tables, dozens of dishes arranged with perfect symmetry. There are soups and stews, dumplings and pancakes, rice and noodles, vegetables and meats, fruits and sweets. Each dish is a work of art, garnished and presented to delight the eye as well as the palate. Each dish has been tested for poison by designated eunuchs who stand nearby, ready to confirm that the food is safe. You sit at the table and select a few items, taking small bites of this and that. The food is excellent, prepared by master chefs using the finest ingredients in the empire. But you taste very little of it. The flavors seem muted, perhaps because you know that pleasure itself is just another ritual, another performance. You eat what is expected, consume what is proper, and then the tables are cleared. 90% of the food is taken away, distributed to servants, or thrown to dogs, or simply discarded. The waste is astronomical, but this too is part of the imperial mystique. An emperor's table must always overflow. After breakfast, you retire to your study to review memorials. This is the real work of governance, reading the reports and petitions that arrive daily from every corner of the empire. Governors describe local conditions, military commanders request supplies, magistrates report on criminal cases, scholars offer unsolicited advice on policy matters. The memorials are written in highly formal language, full of allusions to classical texts and historical precedents. Reading them requires intense concentration and considerable learning. You spend 4 or 5 hours on this task every day, sitting at a desk while eunuch secretaries stand ready to retrieve documents or prepare replies. Your hand cramps from holding the brush, forming characters in the red ink reserved for imperial comments. Most memorials receive only a brief notation, approval or denial, or a request for more information. But some require detailed responses, explanations of policy or corrections of misunderstandings. You are conscientious about this work, at least in these early years of independent rule. You believe that this is what an emperor should do, carefully supervising the administration, making informed decisions based on thorough knowledge of conditions throughout the empire. But the volume is overwhelming. There are never enough hours to read everything thoroughly. Some memorials you skim, catching the main points and making quick decisions. Other memorials you delegate to ministers, trusting them to handle the details. Gradually, imperceptibly, you are losing touch with the actual functioning of the government. The reports you read are filtered, shaped by officials to tell you what they think you want to hear or what they want you to know. The decisions you make are based on incomplete information, influenced by advisors who have their own agendas. You are working harder than ever, spending more hours on governance than most emperors in history, but you are becoming less effective, more isolated, more dependent on intermediaries. Lunch is another elaborate meal, another display of imperial abundance. You eat a little, then put down your chopsticks. The afternoon stretches before you. More memorials to read, more audiences to attend, more rituals to perform. There is a ceremony at one of the palace temples, offerings to ancestors. You must be present, dressed in ceremonial robes, standing for hours while priests chant and incense burns. Your role is simply to be there, to embody the connection between the living and the dead, between the dynasty and its celestial mandate. After the religious ceremony, there is a brief period of rest. You return to your chambers and remove the heavy outer robes. You sit in a more comfortable chair, drink tea, try to relax. But even this rest is not truly private. Eunuchs hover nearby, ready to respond to any need. If you cough, they rush forward with medicine. If you look tired, they suggest a nap. If you express any desire, they immediately work to fulfill it. This constant attention is smothering. You sometimes wish you could be alone, truly alone, for just an hour. But solitude is impossible for an emperor. You are never alone. You will never be alone again. The evening meal is smaller than breakfast or lunch, but still elaborate by any normal standard. You eat with Lady Zheng tonight, a rare pleasure. She sits at a separate table, as is proper, but close enough that you can talk with her. She tells you about your son Changshun, how clever he is, how everyone admires him. You smile, feeling genuine warmth. This is one of the few authentic emotions you are permitted. Love for your children, at least for some of your children, is acceptable and even encouraged. After dinner, you might play Wakey, the strategy game known in the West as Go, Wheat Continue, one of your eunuchs. The game is complex and absorbing, requiring deep concentration and forward planning. For a brief time, you lose yourself in the patterns on the board, in the elegant logic of territory and influence. But even this simple pleasure is constrained. The eunuch must be careful not to win too decisively, not to make you look foolish. So the game is calibrated, manipulated to provide challenge without humiliation. Nothing in your life is allowed to be natural or spontaneous. As night falls, you prepare for bed. The eunuchs return to undress you, reversing the morning ceremony. Layer after layer is removed, folded carefully, stored for the next day, or sent for cleaning. You're washed again, your face and hands cleaned, your teeth scrubbed with salt and herbal powder. You are given sleeping robes, light silk garments that provide some relief after the weight of the day's formal clothing. You climb into bed, and the curtains are drawn, enclosing you in darkness. But sleep does not come easily. You lie awake, your mind churning. The day has been exactly like yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after that, and the day after that. This is your life now. An endless repetition of rituals, each one performed exactly as it has been performed for centuries. You are the most powerful man in the world, and you have no power at all. You cannot choose your own schedule. You cannot eat what you want or when you want. You cannot go where you please. You cannot speak freely. You cannot have genuine friends or honest conversations. Every moment is choreographed, every action prescribed. You are not a person. You are a function, a role, a symbol. The weight of this realization settles over you like a physical burden. You have worked so hard to escape Zhang Jujing's control, to rule in your own right. But now that you are ruling, you discover that nothing has really changed. You have exchanged one form of constraint for another. Zhang's control was personal and direct, but the ritual system's control is even more complete because it is impersonal and eternal. Zhang could die. The rituals cannot die. They will outlive you, outlive your children, outlive the dynasty itself. You think about your father, the Long King Emperor, who escaped this cage through mercury poisoning and death. You think about your ancestors, dozens of emperors stretching back through centuries, each one trapped in this same system, each one performing these same rituals. Some of them were great men, wise and capable. Others were mediocre or incompetent or actively harmful. But it almost didn't matter, because the system ran on its own momentum, grinding forward regardless of the emperor's abilities or desires. You are beginning to understand that the emperor is not the master of the system. He is its prisoner, its most valuable prisoner, kept in luxury, but kept nonetheless. This understanding fills you with a kind of despair. If you cannot control your own life, if every moment is predetermined by protocol and ritual, then what is the point? Why work so hard to govern well, if you are just a cog in a machine? Why read endless memorials, if the decisions are predetermined by precedent? Why attend ceremonies, if they are empty performances? Form without content. The meaninglessness of it all threatens to overwhelm you. You begin to notice things you overlooked before. The way the eunuchs watch you constantly, noting everything you do, everything you say. They are compiling records, keeping track of your movements and decisions and moods. These records will be consulted by historians, used to judge your reign, analyzed by future generations to determine whether you were a good emperor or a bad one. Your life is not your own. It belongs to history, to the dynasty, to the empire. Even your most private moments, your intimacies with your wives and concubines, are noted and recorded. The officials, too, are watching and judging. Every decision you make is scrutinized for adherence to Confucian principles. Every appointment is analyzed for signs of favoritism or corruption. Every policy is debated in memorials that challenge your wisdom and question your judgment. The scholar bureaucrats see themselves as the guardians of proper governance, and they do not hesitate to lecture the emperor when they believe he is straying from virtue. These lectures are couched in respectful language, But the message is clear. They know better than you. They are the true masters of the empire. You are just the symbol they use to legitimize their authority. Your mother notices your growing melancholy. She tries to counsel you, reminding you of your duties and responsibilities. But her words sound hollow now. Duty to whom? Responsibility for what? You are 32 years old, and you have spent your entire life in service to abstractions. The dynasty, the empire, the mandate of heaven, the cosmic order. These grand concepts have consumed your existence, leaving nothing for yourself, for your own happiness, for your own meaning. You are sacrificing everything for a system that does not care about you as an individual, that would replace you without a second thought if you died tomorrow. The succession crisis makes everything worse. You want to name your beloved son Changshun as heir, but the officials insist that tradition demands the eldest son of the empress to be chosen. They send memorial after memorial, hundreds of them, all making the same argument. You are the emperor. You should be able to make this one decision, to choose your own heir. But the system says no. Tradition says no. The officials say no. And you begin to realize that you do not have the power to override them. Not really. You can issue decrees. But if the officials refuse to implement them, if they drag their feet and obstruct and delay, then your decrees are meaningless. This is the moment when something breaks inside you. You have tried to be a good emperor, to follow the Confucian model of virtuous rulership that Zhang drilled into you. You have worked diligently, attended audiences, read memorials, performed rituals, and what has it gotten you? You are still constrained, still controlled, still powerless in the ways that matter most. The officials will not let you choose your heir. The rituals will not let you live your own life. The system will not acknowledge that you are a human being with desires and dreams and needs. You look around at the golden bars of your cage, the magnificent prison that is the Forbidden City, and you make a decision. If you cannot be free, if you cannot rule as you want, if you cannot even choose your own successor, then you will stop playing the game. You will withdraw. You will refuse to participate in the elaborate charade of Confucian governance. The officials want a sage emperor who listens to their advice and implements their policies. They will get nothing. They will get an emperor who simply disappears, who retreats into the inner court, and refuses to come out. Let them see how they like that. This decision does not come all at once. It builds gradually over months and years. You begin to miss audiences, claiming illness or pressing business in the inner court. You take longer to respond to memorials, sometimes letting weeks pass before issuing decisions. You refuse to make appointments, leaving positions vacant rather than choosing between competing candidates. It is a passive rebellion, a strike against the system that has imprisoned you, and it will define the rest of your reign, transforming you from a conscientious ruler into the absent emperor. The ghost in the palace, the man who ruled by refusing to rule. Lady Zhang is the only person in the Forbidden City who makes you feel human. When you are with her, the burden of being emperor lifts, if only briefly. She does not treat you as a divine symbol or a ceremonial function. She treats you as a man, with all the flaws and needs and vulnerabilities that implies. She laughs at your jokes. She listens to your complaints. She holds you when you are troubled and asks nothing in return except your affection. In a world of calculated relationships and ritual interactions, what you have with her feels genuine, and you cling to it desperately. She is not the most beautiful woman in the palace. She is not the most accomplished in the traditional arts of music and needlework. But she is intelligent and perceptive, able to read your moods and respond to them appropriately. When you want conversation, she engages you in discussions about poetry and philosophy. When you want silence, she sits quietly beside you, her presence a comfort without demands. When you want passion, she gives herself to you with an enthusiasm that seems authentic, not performed. Whether this authenticity is real or just a more skillful performance, you choose not to examine too closely. You need to believe that someone in this palace sees you rather than your title. Your first son, by Lady Zhang, is born in the 12th year of your reign. You name him Zhu Changshun. And from the moment you hold him, you love him with an intensity that surprises you. He is a beautiful baby, healthy and strong. And as he grows, he proves to be clever and charming. He learns to speak early, and his first words delight you. He learns to read quickly, showing a precocious intelligence. When you visit Lady Zheng's quarters, you spend as much time playing with Changshun as you do with his mother. You commission toys for him, elaborate mechanical devices from the Imperial workshops. You personally teach him calligraphy, guiding his small hand as he forms his first characters. You already have a son by your Empress Wangju. Kanglua was born in the 3rd year of your reign, and by all traditional logic, he should be designated as crown prince and raised as your heir. But you feel no warmth toward this boy. When you look at him, you see only your empress, a woman you married out of political necessity, a woman who has never stirred any genuine emotion in you. Kang Luo is a serious, withdrawn child, awkward in your presence, unable to please you no matter what he does. It is not really his fault, but you cannot help comparing him unfavorably to Changshun, who seems to embody everything you could want in a son and heir. The law is clear on this matter. The succession should go to the eldest son of the empress, the legitimate heir. This principle has been followed in China for thousands of years. It exists precisely to prevent the kind of instability that comes from disputed successions, from competing sons and their mothers' factions fighting for power. But you are the emperor. Surely you should have some say in who succeeds you. Surely your preference should count for something, and so you begin to delay the designation of Kang Luo as crown prince, hoping to find some way to elevate Changshun instead. The officials notice this delay immediately, and they are alarmed. A clear succession is essential for stability. Uncertainty about the heir creates opportunities for faction and intrigue, weakens the authority of government, invites chaos. They begin submitting memorials urging you to designate Kang Luo as crown prince without further delay. These memorials are respectful, but insistent. They cite precedent, quote the classics, invoke the wisdom of ancient sage kings. The message is clear. You must follow tradition. You must choose Chang. There is no alternative. You ignore these memorials. You refuse to respond, refuse to make the designation. Months pass, then years. The officials grow more insistent. More and more memorials arrive, some from individual officials, others signed by dozens or even hundreds of bureaucrats. They begin to use stronger language, warning you that your refusal to designate an heir is damaging the empire, creating instability, showing disrespect for ancestral traditions. Some officials even suggest that you are being manipulated by palace women, that Lady Zheng is improperly influencing your judgment. This accusation infuriates you. How dare they suggest that you, the son of heaven, are being manipulated by a mere concubine? You are making your own decisions, following your own heart. But their constant pressure, their refusal to accept your preference, drives you to deeper resentment. The succession issue becomes a test of wills, a battle between your authority as emperor and their authority as guardians of Confucian tradition. Neither side will back down. Lady Zheng, for her part, carefully maintains an appearance of propriety. She never directly argues for Changshun's elevation. She never criticizes Kang Luo or the empress. In public, she is the model of a respectful concubine, deferential and humble. But in private, with you, she subtly reinforces your preference. She talks about Changshun's virtues, his intelligence and charm. She mentions, as if casually, how well loved he is by the palace staff, how everyone who meets him is impressed. She never pushes too hard, never makes demands. She simply plants seeds and lets your own emotions do the rest. The Empress Wang, meanwhile, becomes increasingly isolated and bitter. She sees her position being undermined, her son passed over, all because you prefer another woman. She has done everything required of an empress, performed all the proper rituals, maintained perfect decorum, yet none of it matters because you do not love her. She begins to build alliances with officials who support the legitimate succession, creating a faction devoted to protecting Kang Luo's rights. The palace divides into camps, those supporting Changshun and those supporting Shang, and the rivalry becomes increasingly bitter. Your mother, the Empress Dowager, tries to mediate this conflict, but even her authority is insufficient. She recognizes the danger of the situation, understands that disputed successions have destroyed dynasties throughout Chinese history. She urges you, repeatedly, to designate Kang Luo as crown prince and end the uncertainty. She points out that you can still favor Changshun in other ways, grant him titles and wealth, give him a prestigious position, but the succession must follow tradition. You listen to her arguments with growing impatience. Even your own mother, it seems, is against you. The conflict drags on for years, consuming ever more political energy. By the 20th year of your reign, it has become the central issue at court. Every appointment, every policy debate, somehow becomes entangled with the succession question. Officials align themselves with one prince or the other, building networks of support, preparing for the eventual transition of power. The government becomes increasingly paralyzed, unable to address other pressing issues because everything is. The decision does not announce itself with There is no dramatic moment when you declare your intention to withdraw from governance. Instead, it happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, like a tide receding from a shore. One morning, you simply do not attend the dawn audience. You send word that you are indisposed, that the officials should present their memorials through the usual channels, and await your written responses. The officials accept this with some concern, but no alarm. Emperors occasionally miss audiences due to illness or pressing business. It is not unprecedented. But you do not return the next day, or the day after that. Weeks pass, then months, and still you do not appear in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The throne sits empty, while officials gather and perform their rituals to no one. At first they continue to submit memorials, expecting that you will resume your duties once you have recovered from whatever is troubling you. But as the absence stretches into years, they begin to understand that something fundamental has changed. The emperor has not fallen ill. He has simply chosen to disappear. Your retreat begins in the 21st year of your reign. You are 43 years old, a middle-aged man who has spent more than 3 decades in the golden cage of the Forbidden City. You have tried to be a good emperor, by your own understanding at least. You attended audiences regularly. You read countless memorials. You made difficult decisions. You waged successful wars. You maintained the empire. And what has it gotten you? Constant criticism from officials who think they know better than you. Endless lectures about Confucian, virtue, and historical precedent. A succession crisis that has poisoned your court and consumed years of political energy. You are exhausted, resentful, and profoundly disillusioned. The inner court becomes your entire world. You move your primary residence to the Palace of Heavenly Purity and rarely venture beyond its immediate surroundings. The world shrinks to a series of familiar courtyards and pavilions, gardens and halls, where you can move without the elaborate ceremonies required for public appearances. You see only a small circle of people, mostly eunuchs, who serve your personal needs, and a few favorite concubines. Lady Zheng remains your constant companion, and your son Changshun visits regularly, though you notice he is growing into a rather spoiled young man, indulged by palace servants, and taught to expect deference rather than to earn respect. The official business of the empire does not stop simply because you have stopped attending to it. Memorials still arrive, hundreds of them each week, piling up in your chambers like drifts of snow. At first, you make some effort to deal with them. You skim the most important ones, issue brief responses, delegate decisions to trusted ministers. But gradually, even this minimal engagement becomes too much. The memorials go unread, stacked in corners or stored in chests. Decisions that require imperial approval simply do not get made. Appointments that need your confirmation remain vacant. Policies that await your ratification languish in bureaucratic limbo. The government begins to seize up, like a mechanism deprived of the lubricant that allows its parts to move smoothly. Provincial positions remain unfilled for years because you will not approve appointments. Tax reforms cannot be implemented because you will not issue the necessary decrees. Infrastructure projects cannot begin because you will not authorize the expenditures. The bureaucracy attempts to work around these obstacles, to govern without your active participation, but there are limits to what they can do. The emperor's formal approval is required for countless decisions, and without it, the system grinds to a halt. The officials respond with alarm and frustration. They continue to submit memorials, now pleading with you to resume your duties. They describe the deteriorating situation in the provinces, the growing inefficiency of government, the damage being done to the empire by your absence. Some officials request audiences, desperate to speak with you directly, to understand what is happening and perhaps convince you to change course. You deny these requests. You have nothing to say to these men who have spent years lecturing you and constraining you. Let them experience what it is like when the emperor does not cooperate, when the center of the system simply opts out. Your mother, the Empress Dowager, is perhaps the person most troubled by your withdrawal. She understands better than anyone the psychological burden you carry, having watched you struggle with it since childhood. But she also understands the responsibilities of imperial power, the duty that comes with the mandate of heaven. She comes to your quarters regularly, trying to counsel you, to understand what has driven you to this extreme behavior. You receive her with proper filial respect, but you do not really listen to her arguments. She sounds like all the others, talking about duty and responsibility and the needs of the empire. You have given the empire 30 years. Is that not enough? The eunuchs, particularly those closest to you, thrive in this new arrangement. With the scholar officials marginalized and you sequestered in the inner court, the eunuchs become the primary channel of communication between the emperor and the outside world. They control access to you, determine which memorials you might actually see, deliver your infrequent commands and decisions. This gives them enormous power, and they use it to enrich themselves and their allies. Corruption, always present in the palace, becomes endemic. Positions are sold to the highest bidder. Decisions are influenced by bribes. The eunuchs build personal fortunes while the empire slowly deteriorates. You know about this corruption, at least in general terms. Some part of you recognizes that your withdrawal has unleashed forces that are damaging the empire, but you find it difficult to care. These officials who now complain about eunuch corruption, where were they when you needed support? They spent years opposing you, frustrating your desires, treating you as a ceremonial figurehead who should simply rubber stamp their decisions. Now, they are experiencing the consequences of an emperor who truly does nothing. And perhaps they are learning that a passive, disengaged emperor is even worse than one who occasionally overrides their recommendations. Your days take on a new rhythm, one determined entirely by your own whims, rather than by ritual or duty. You wake when you feel like it, often late in the morning. You dress in comfortable robes, rather than formal regalia. You eat when hungry, rather than at prescribed times. This freedom should feel liberating, but instead it feels empty. Without structure, without purpose, time becomes a shapeless thing. Days blend into weeks, weeks into months. You fill the hours with diversions, with entertainments that provide momentary distraction but no lasting satisfaction. You develop an obsession with construction projects, particularly with your own tomb. Chinese emperors traditionally began planning their final resting place early in their reign, but you take this to an extreme. You pour enormous resources into creating the most magnificent tomb complex in Ming history, a vast underground palace that will house your remains and those of your emperor. The project takes years and costs a fortune, draining funds that might have been used for more practical purposes. But you find a strange comfort in planning your own death, in creating a monument that will outlast your troubled reign. You also turn to alcohol, drinking more heavily than before. Wine has always been part of palace life, served at banquets and ceremonies, but now you drink for escape rather than for pleasure. The wine dulls the sharp edges of your thoughts, softens the ache of your isolation, makes the empty hours pass more quickly. Your health begins to decline. You gain weight, becoming obese by your late 40s. Your joints ache. You suffer from digestive problems and headaches. The palace physicians prescribe tonics and treatments, but you ignore most of their advice. What does it matter if you are healthy? What are you staying healthy for? Lady Zhang remains your primary companion, but even this relationship becomes strained. She has achieved everything she wanted, secured a position of great influence, and ensured that her son is well provided for, even if he will not become crown prince. But your withdrawal troubles her. She sees you becoming bitter and self-destructive, wasting your remaining years in resentful inactivity. She tries to encourage you to engage more with governance, to find some middle path between the exhausting demands of full participation and the complete abdication you have chosen. But you resist her suggestions. You have made your decision. You will not be controlled anymore. Not by officials, not by tradition, not even by people who claim to love you. The succession issue remains unresolved. Chang Luo, now a young man, waits in limbo, neither confirmed as heir, nor definitively rejected. Chang Shun, your favorite, grows up knowing that his father loves him but cannot give him the throne. The uncertainty damages both young men, leaves them in a state of perpetual anxiety about their futures. But you cannot bring yourself to resolve it. To designate Chang Luo would be to admit defeat, to acknowledge that the officials were right and you were wrong. To designate Chang Shun would provoke a crisis that might threaten the dynasty, so you do nothing. And the limbo continues. Occasionally you emerge from your self-imposed exile to assert your authority in some arbitrary way. You might suddenly dismiss an official who has been too insistent in his memorials. You might order a lavish ceremony or an expensive construction project. You might promote a eunuch to a position of power, overriding the protests of the civil bureaucracy. These interventions are unpredictable and often seem capricious, driven more by mood than by any coherent policy. They keep everyone off balance, uncertain about what you might do next. Perhaps this is the point. If you cannot be a good emperor in the Confucian sense, you can at least be an unpredictable one, someone who refuses to fit into their neat categories and expectations. The years pass in this strange limbo. The 21st year becomes the 30th, then the 40th. You are in your 50s now, an old man by the standards of your time. Nearly 3 decades have passed since you last regularly attended morning audiences. An entire generation of officials has risen through the ranks who have never actually met the emperor, who know you only as an absence, a void at the center of government. The Forbidden City continues its elaborate rituals, but the rituals are increasingly empty, performances conducted for their own sake rather than in service of any larger purpose. The empire, somehow, continues to function. The bureaucracy is resilient, developed over thousands of years to operate even without effective central leadership. Provincial governors manage their territories. Magistrates settle disputes. Tax collectors gather revenue. The military defends the borders. though less effectively than in your earlier years. Life goes on for the 100 million people of China, most of whom have never seen the emperor and who are only vaguely aware that he has stopped governing. But cracks are appearing in the system. Corruption is spreading. Revenues are declining. Problems that could have been addressed are being ignored. The dynasty is slowly rotting from within, and you, sequestered in the inner court, are both cause and symptom of this decay. From behind the walls of the inner court, you watch the empire drift like a ship without a rudder. Reports still reach you, filtered through eunuchs and the few officials you still occasionally consult. And what you hear troubles you on those rare moments when you allow yourself to care. But mostly you have insulated yourself from the consequences of your withdrawal, cocooned in luxury and routine, letting the empire solve its own problems or fail to solve them. The most immediate effect of your long absence is the collapse of effective appointment procedures. The civil service examination system still functions, producing new Jinshi scholars each year, brilliant young men who have devoted their lives to mastering the Confucian classics. But these new graduates cannot receive official positions without imperial approval, and you refuse to conduct the appointment ceremonies. By the 30th year of your reign, there are hundreds of qualified candidates waiting for posts that never materialize. The backlog grows year by year, creating a generation of frustrated scholars who have earned the right to serve but are denied the opportunity. Existing officials fare little better. When someone dies or retires, their position often simply remains vacant because you will not approve a replacement. By some estimates, nearly half the positions in the imperial government are unfilled by the late period of your reign. Provincial administrations struggle to function with skeleton staffs. Central government ministries cannot fulfill their responsibilities. The entire bureaucratic apparatus, once so efficient under Zheng Zhujiang's administration, becomes a shadow of itself, barely maintaining basic functions. This administrative decay has real consequences for ordinary people. In provinces, where governors' positions remain vacant, local strongmen fill the power vacuum, collecting taxes for their own benefit and ignoring imperial directives. In areas where magistrates are absent, disputes go unresolved and criminals operate with impunity. The Grand Canal, that vital artery that brings grain from the south to feed the capital, falls into disrepair because no one has authority to order and fund the necessary maintenance. Flood control systems deteriorate. Roads go unrepaired. The infrastructure that makes empire possible slowly crumbles. The military suffers perhaps most of all. You refuse to conduct the military examinations that qualify officers for promotion. You will not approve new troop levies, even when commanders insist they are necessary. Defense budgets languish unspent because expenditures require your authorization, which you will not give. The armies that once scored victories in Korea and the Southwest become undermanned and underfunded. Discipline declines. Training lapses. Equipment becomes obsolete. The banner armies that guard the northern frontier grow weak precisely at the moment when a new threat is emerging. That threat comes from Manchuria, from tribes beyond the Great Wall that are beginning to unite under capable leaders. The Jakan people, who have been fragmented and relatively powerless for centuries, start to coalesce into a more organized force. They raid Chinese settlements, testing the border defenses and finding them increasingly inadequate. Your generals send urgent memorials warning of this growing danger, requesting resources and authority to strengthen the frontier. These memorials join the thousands of others piled unread in your chambers. You cannot be bothered with distant border problems. Let the generals handle it. That is what they are paid for. The financial situation deteriorates as well. The silver-based monetary system that has brought prosperity to the empire begins to show strain. The flow of silver from European trade starts to fluctuate, creating inflationary pressures. Tax collection becomes less efficient as corrupt officials skim revenues for themselves, knowing that the absent emperor will not scrutinize the accounts. The treasury, once so full during your early reign, gradually depletes. There is still money for your personal expenses, for the palace, for your tomb construction, but there is less for everything else, for the essential functions of government, for defense, for disaster relief. Natural disasters strike with increasing frequency during the later years of your reign, or perhaps they simply seem more frequent because the government responds to them so poorly. Floods along the Yellow River displace hundreds of thousands of people. Droughts in the north cause crop failures and famine. Earthquakes collapse buildings and kill thousands. In the past, the imperial government would have mobilized relief efforts, sent grain from the granaries, dispatched officials to coordinate reconstruction. Now, these disasters are managed haphazardly, if at all. Local communities must fend for themselves. The suffering is immense, and the people begin to wonder whether the mandate of heaven is slipping away from the Ming Dynasty. Your eunuchs thrive in this chaos. With you uninterested in governance, and the scholar officials marginalized, the eunuchs become the real power in the capital. They form networks and factions, competing with each other for influence and wealth. They sell offices to the highest bidder, pocketing the proceeds. They divert funds meant for government operations into their own accounts. They build mansions and live like princes, castrated servants who have become more powerful than many nobles. The most prominent of these eunuchs amass fortunes that rival the imperial treasury itself. You tolerate this corruption, even enable it, because the eunuchs are useful to you. They shield you from the demands of the officials. They run interference, turning away petitioners and deflecting criticism. They maintain the fiction that you are still governing, still making decisions, when in reality you are doing almost nothing. In return for these services, you allow them to enrich themselves. What do you care if they steal from the treasury? Money means little to you. You have everything you could possibly want in material terms. Let them have their share. The scholar official class watches this corruption with horror and impotent rage. They submit memorial after memorial denouncing the eunuchs, demanding that you rein them in, restore proper governance. A few brave officials even accuse you directly of neglecting your duties, of betraying the trust that heaven has placed in you. These officials are punished when their memorials come to your attention. Some are flogged, others are dismissed from office. A few are imprisoned. You will tolerate criticism up to a point, but there are limits. You are still the emperor, and no matter how much you have withdrawn, you will not allow outright insubordination. The relationship between you and the bureaucracy has completely broken down. What should be a partnership, emperor and officials working together to govern the empire, has become a cold war. They lecture and complain. You ignore and occasionally punish. Neither side trusts the other. Neither side respects the other. The Confucian ideal of virtuous emperor, guided by wise ministers, has devolved into bitter stalemate, and the empire pays the price. Inside the Forbidden City, life continues in its own strange bubble of luxury and ritual. The palace still employs thousands of servants. The kitchens still prepare elaborate meals. The gardens are still maintained. The ceremonies are still performed, though now to empty halls and absent audiences. You are the eye of a storm, living in artificial calm while everything around you slowly disappears. You walk your familiar gardens, practice your calligraphy, drink your wine, and try not to think about what is happening beyond the palace walls. Lady Zheng grows older along with you. Her beauty fades, replaced by the dignity of middle age. Your passion has long since cooled into something more like companionship. Two people who have shared a lifetime in this strange place, who understand each other's compromises and disappointments. She no longer tries to influence your decisions or advocate for her son. She has accepted that Changshun will not be emperor, that Shanglua, despite everything, will likely inherit the throne. She focuses now on securing her own future and her son's comfort, accumulating wealth and property, building alliances that will protect them after you are gone. Your mother, the Empress Dowager, is now an old woman, in her 70s, and increasingly frail. She has watched her transformation from diligent young emperor to bitter recluse, with a sorrow that she rarely expresses, but that you can see in her eyes. She still comes to visit you occasionally, though the walk from her quarters to yours is now difficult for her. She sits with you in silence, more often than not, having run out of arguments and advice, simply being present as a reminder of your humanity, of the family bonds that persist even in this isolated place. When said yes, a few years before you do, you feel a profound emptiness. She was the last person who remembered you as a child, the last connection to a time before the weight of the throne crushed you. In the 40th year of your reign, you are 62 years old, ancient by the standards of your time. Your body is failing, ravaged by decades of excessive drinking, overeating, and physical inactivity. You can barely walk without assistance. Your breath comes in labored gasps. Your skin is sallow, your eyes yellowed. The physicians shake their heads and prescribe their useless remedies, herbal tonics and acupuncture, and prayers to various deities. You know you are dying, and you face this prospect with a mixture of relief and regret. Relief because death will finally free you from this golden cage. You have been trapped in the Forbidden City for your entire life, from birth to death. Never truly free, never truly yourself. Death, at least, will be an escape, a release from the burden of being the son of heaven. You will not have to attend any more audiences, read any more memorials, perform any more rituals. You will not have to be the emperor anymore. You can finally just be nothing, dissolve back into the void from which you came, but also regret, because you are leaving behind such a mess. You know, even in your self-imposed ignorance, that the empire is in trouble. The borders are insecure. The bureaucracy is paralyzed. Corruption is rampant. The succession is uncertain. You have ruled for nearly half a century, one of the longest reigns in Chinese history, and you will be remembered not for your early successes but for your long withdrawal, for the 30 years when you simply gave up. Chang Zhujiang's legacy, which you tried so hard to destroy, looks better with each passing year. At least under his administration, the empire functioned. Under yours, it has slowly come apart. You think about issuing some final decrees, trying to set things right before you die. Perhaps you could formally designate Chang Luo as heir, ending decades of uncertainty. Perhaps you could dismiss the most corrupt eunuchs, give the skull officials a chance to restore proper governance. Perhaps you could apologize, in some way, for your long absence, for the damage you have done through your stubborn refusal to perform your duties. But you do none of these things. It is too late, and you are too tired, and some part of you is still too angry to give the satisfaction of a deathbed conversion to virtue. Instead, you spend your final days, much as you spent the last 30 years, secluded in your chambers, attended by eunuchs, and visited occasionally by Lady Zheng. You drift in and out of consciousness, fever dreams, mixing with memories. You remember your childhood, the confusion and fear of those early years. You remember Zheng Zhujiang, his stern face, and demanding lessons. You remember the brief glory years, when you thought you could be a great emperor. You remember the succession crisis that broke your will to rule. You remember making the decision to withdraw, that moment when something inside you gave up and chose isolation over engagement. Were you wrong? The question haunts your final hours. Should you have accepted the constraints, played the role that was assigned to you, been the Confucian Sage Emperor that everyone wanted? Or were you right to rebel, to refuse participation in a system that treated you as a ceremonial object rather than a human being? You genuinely do not know. Both paths seem terrible in retrospect. To submit would have meant erasing yourself completely, becoming nothing but a function of the system. To rebel, as you did, meant abandoning your duties and watching the empire deteriorate. There was no good choice, only different varieties of failure. The inner court in your final decades becomes a place of paranoia and darkness, where reality and rumor blur together in a fog of suspicion and fear. You have cut yourself off from the legitimate channels of government, from the scholar officios who might provide reliable information and honest counsel. Instead, you rely entirely on the eunuchs, and the eunuchs have their own agendas, their own versions of truth that they feed you to serve their interests. The eunuch factions compete viciously for dominance. Some align themselves with Lady Zheng and Prince Sheng, betting that your favoritism might still translate into power after your death. Others quietly support Prince Chang Lui and the Empress faction, recognizing that legitimacy will probably prevail in the end. Still others play both sides, accumulating wealth and hedging their bets. These factions engage in a constant shadow war of manipulation and sabotage, poisoning each other's influence, spreading rumors, orchestrating scandals. You hear about these machinations only in fragments, distorted accounts filtered through layers of servants and intermediaries. A eunuch reports that Lady Zheng is plotting something, but the details are vague and possibly fabricated. Another claims that officials are conspiring to force you to abdicate in favor of Chang Luo, a story that may be true or may be designed to inflame your paranoia. You receive reports of supernatural portents, comets, and earthquakes, and strange births, all interpreted to suggest that heaven is displeased with someone, though no two interpreters agree on who has lost the mandate. The palace itself seems to darken in these years. Corridors that once gleamed with polish grow dingy. Gardens that were immaculately maintained become slightly overgrown, the servants cutting corners now that no one is really supervising. Buildings fall into disrepair. The vast complex that was once the most magnificent architectural achievement in the world begins to show its age. Paint peels, tiles, crack, wood rots. It is subtle, the decline of decades rather than years, but it is unmistakable. The Forbidden City is decaying along with its emperor. Strange incidents occur with disturbing frequency. A fire breaks out in one of the palace storehouses, destroying valuable records and treasures. Officials say it was an accident, careless servants with lamps, but rumors suggest arson, someone trying to cover up evidence of corruption. A eunuch is found dead in his quarters, officially a suicide but possibly murdered by rivals. One of the minor princes falls ill with mysterious symptoms that suggest poisoning. Lady Zheng herself becomes sick, and she is convinced that the Emperor's faction is trying to kill her. She survives, but her health is permanently damaged, and her paranoia, matching your own, intensifies. The most disturbing incident is the attack on Prince Konglue in the 43rd year of your reign. A madman armed with a wooden club somehow penetrates the security of the Forbidden City and enters the Crown Prince's quarters, attacking him and his attendants. Chongluo survives, but the incident raises terrifying questions. How did this intruder get past multiple layers of guards? Was he truly mad, or was someone directing him? Who benefits from an attack on the air? The investigation produces no satisfactory answers, only more accusations and conspiracy theories. The Changshun faction suggests that Changluo staged the attack to garner sympathy. The Changluo faction insists it was an assassination attempt ordered by Lady Zheng. You issue decrees demanding the truth, but the truth is unknowable in this environment of lies and manipulation. You become obsessed with security, with protecting yourself from the plots you imagine everywhere. You change sleeping quarters unpredictably, never staying in the same room 2 nights in a row. You have your food tested multiple times, by multiple eunuchs, watching carefully for any sign of hesitation or fear that might indicate poison. You trust no one completely, not even Lady Zheng, though you continue to spend time with her, out of habit, and because loneliness is worse than paranoia. The palace becomes your prison not just figuratively, but literally. You are afraid to leave it, afraid that beyond your immediate chambers lies danger and betrayal. The isolation does terrible things to your mind. You have always been introspective, given to brooding and melancholy, but now your thoughts turn genuinely dark. You imagine plots that probably do not exist. You see significance in random events, patterns and chaos. A eunuch hesitates before responding to a question, and you wonder if he is concealing something. A dish at dinner tastes slightly off, and you refuse to eat it, convinced it is poisoned. You hear noises in the night, footsteps in empty corridors, whispers and shadows, and you do not know whether they are real or phantoms of your deteriorating mind. Sleep becomes difficult. You lie awake for hours, your mind churning through old grievances and new fears. You think about all the people who have tried to control you, from Zhang Zhuzhang to the Scaleficials, to your own mother. You think about your sons and wonder which one will inherit this poisoned throne, which one will have to deal with the mess you are leaving behind. You think about death, which seems to be approaching slowly but inevitably, and you wonder what awaits you in the afterlife. Will you be judged for your failures? Will your ancestors be waiting, disappointed and angry at how you have squandered your reign? On the rare occasions when you do sleep, you have nightmares. You dream of drowning, of being pulled under dark water while hands reach from above but do not quite grasp yours. You dream of being lost in an endless maze of corridors, all identical, searching for an exit that does not exist. You dream of standing before your ancestors, trying to explain your reign, your words coming out as meaningless sounds while they shake their heads in disapproval. You wake from these dreams gasping and sweating, and the eunuchs rush to your side with lamps and reassurances, but the fear lingers. Lady Zheng, aging and ill herself, tries to comfort you, but there is an edge of desperation to her now. She knows that when you die, her position becomes precarious. Changluo will become emperor, and he has no reason to be kind to the woman who competed with his mother for decades. She will be lucky to escape with her life and some modest pension. More likely, she will spend her remaining years in enforced seclusion, cut off from her son, forgotten, and she clings to you as much for her own security as out of affection, and you both know it. The relationship that once seemed like genuine love has become a transaction, to frighten people using each other for comfort and protection. Your conversations with her in these late years are strange and circular. You talk about the past, about the early years of your reign, when everything seemed possible. She tells you that you were right to fight for Changshun, that the officials were wrong to oppose you. You want to believe her, but you are not sure anymore. Maybe they were right. Maybe you should have followed tradition, designated Changluo immediately, avoided the whole succession crisis. Maybe everything that went wrong afterwards stems from that original refusal, that moment when you chose your personal desires over your imperial duties. But it is too late to change anything now. The decisions are made, the consequences are unfolding. All you can do is watch and wait for the end. Strange religious practices begin to occupy more of your time. You have always been somewhat superstitious, like most Chinese of your era, but now you become obsessed with Taoist rituals and Buddhist ceremonies. You invite priests and monks into the palace to perform elaborate rites meant to extend your life, to ward off evil spirits, to secure blessings from the heavens. These ceremonies are expensive and time-consuming, requiring rare ingredients and complex preparations. The priests promise you health and longevity, peace of mind and spiritual protection. You pay them lavishly, knowing even as you do that they are probably charlatans. But what else can you do? You have tried ruling well and failed. You have tried withdrawing, and found no peace. Perhaps magic and prayer will succeed where virtue and wisdom have failed. You also become fascinated with your own mortality in morbid ways. You visit your tomb frequently, inspecting the construction, imagining yourself lying in the elaborate coffin that has been prepared. The tomb is magnificent. Everything you ordered, and more. A vast underground palace, with multiple chambers, filled with treasures and artifacts that will accompany you to the afterlife. Your body will be dressed in robes, sewn with gold thread, and placed in a coffin of rare wood. Your two primary consorts, the Empress and Lady Zheng, will eventually join you here, the three of you spending eternity together in death, as you never could in life. The tomb is your true legacy. You think sometimes, let the empire crumble, let the dynasty fall. At least this monument will remain testimony that the Wanli emperor existed, that he commanded resources beyond imagining, even if he could not command himself. The final years blend together in a haze of decline and decay. The empire continues to deteriorate. The Manchu threat grows more serious, but you barely register it. The corruption gets worse, but you do not care. The officials continue to submit their useless memorials, and you continue to ignore them. The succession remains uncertain, and you make no move to resolve it. You are waiting for death, for the final release, and everything else seems increasingly irrelevant. Your world has contracted to almost nothing. You die on the 18th day of the 7th month, in the 48th year of your reign. The year is 1620 by the Western calendar, though you would never use such a measure. You are 68 years old, ancient by any standard, having outlived most of your contemporaries. Death comes not suddenly, but gradually, a slow fading over several days. Your body simply gives out, worn down by decades of excess and inactivity, by the weight you carry and the poisons you have consumed. The physicians cluster around your bed, but they can do nothing. They have known for weeks that you are dying. Now they simply wait for the inevitable, ready to perform the rituals that will mark the passing of an emperor. Lady Zheng is with you at the end, holding your hand as your breathing becomes more labored. Changshun is there too, his face pale with genuine grief, mixed with fear about his own uncertain future. A few senior eunuchs stand nearby, witnesses to history, already mentally composing the reports they will send to the court. You look at these faces, blurred by your failing vision, and you feel almost nothing. A vague sadness, perhaps, a tired acceptance, but not fear. Death is a release, an end to this long imprisonment. You'll close your eyes, and the world fades away. The morning rituals begin immediately. Your body is washed and dressed in your finest robes, the dragon robes you wore at your coronation nearly 50 years ago, now let out to accommodate your much larger frame. Your face is painted to restore some semblance of life. You are placed in the temporary coffin, and the wailing begins. Eunuchs and servants, and palace women, performing elaborate displays of grief. Some of it is genuine, most of it is theater, the expected response to the death of an emperor. The sound of mourning fills the forbidden city, echoing through courtyards and halls. Kang Lue, the son you neglected, is now the Taikang emperor. His reign will last only 1 month before he too dies, in circumstances so suspicious that historians will debate them for centuries. Was he poisoned by the Changshun faction? Did he kill himself? Or did he simply succumb to the stress of finally achieving a position he has waited for his entire life? The truth will never be known with certainty, but the brief, disastrous reign of your eldest son seems like a final curse on the succession crisis you could never resolve. Your funeral is magnificent, as befits the emperor who reigned longer than any other Ming ruler. The ceremony takes days, elaborate rituals performed by hundreds of priests and officials. Your coffin is carried in a massive procession from the Forbidden City to your tomb in the Ming Tombs complex north of Beijing. Thousands of soldiers lined the route. Thousands of mourners performed the required prostrations. The entire empire, officially at least, grieves for its departed sovereign. But what are they grieving? What legacy have you left? The question haunts the eulogies and memorial inscriptions. The official historians, bound by convention, will record your accomplishments. They will note the prosperity of your early reign, the military victories in Korea, the cultural flowering that occurred under your patronage. They will mention the magnificent tomb you built, the porcelain and art you commissioned. These were real achievements, undeniable contributions to Chinese civilization. But they will also have to record the withdrawal, the 30 years of absence that paralyzed the government. They will document the unfilled positions, the ignored memorials, the collapse of effective administration. They will note the rise of eunuch power and the spread of corruption. Most damningly, they will record the succession crisis, the decades of uncertainty that destabilized the court and created factions that will continue to poison politics long after your death. Future historians will debate endlessly whether you were a victim of circumstances or the architect of your own failure. The answer, as is often the case with history, is probably both. The Manchu threat that was growing on your borders will explode into full crisis within a generation. The dynasty you inherited and failed to preserve will collapse in 1644, just 24 years after your death. Your grandson will be the last Ming emperor, hanging himself from a tree as rebel armies storm Beijing. The Forbidden City will fall to invaders for the first time in its history. The Ming Dynasty, which seemed so permanent and eternal during your childhood, will prove to be mortal after all, and your long disastrous reign will be seen as a key moment in its decline, the point when effective governance gave way to paralysis and decay. Your personal tragedy was that you possessed everything except what you truly needed: freedom. You were the most powerful person in the world, and yet completely powerless to live your own life, to make your own choices, to be your own person. The gilded cage that was the Forbidden City offered every luxury except the one thing that might have made you happy: genuine human connection and authentic existence. You could have anything you wanted except what you truly wanted, which was to not be the emperor. But that option was never available. You were born to the throne, raised for the throne, locked into a role that you could never escape except through death. And so you spent nearly 50 years trapped in a performance, playing the part of the son of heaven while inside you remained Jew, a confused boy who wanted love and friendship and meaning. The disconnect between the role and the person eventually broke something inside you, leading to the long withdrawal that defined your reign. The greatest irony is that you possessed absolute power but used it mainly to not use it. You could have commanded armies, enacted sweeping reforms, reshaped the empire according to your vision. Instead, you commanded nothing, enacted nothing, reshaped nothing. You simply stopped participating, choosing absence over engagement, silence over speech. This was your rebellion, your assertion of autonomy. If you could not be free to live as you wished, you would at least be free to not perform your duties. It was a rebellion that hurt no one as much as it hurt yourself and the empire you were supposed to serve. In the end, you were the emperor of nothing. You ruled over the largest, wealthiest, most powerful empire on earth, and yet you ruled over nothing because you chose to rule over nothing. Your withdrawal turned your reign into a void, an absence where there should have been presence, silence where there should have been voice. Future generations will look back on the Wanli era and see squandered potential, opportunities missed, problems ignored, a long, slow decline when there could have been continued glory. Was there another way? Could you have found some middle path between complete submission to the system and total withdrawal from it? Perhaps. But it would have required a wisdom and strength of character that no one could reasonably expect from a child raised in isolation and burdened with divine status. You were, in the end, a human being asked to be more than human. You were expected to be perfectly virtuous, infinitely patient, tireless in duty, selfless in service. These expectations were impossible, and when you failed to meet them, when your humanity asserted itself, the system had no way to accommodate it. Your story is not unique. Throughout history, emperors and kings and absolute rulers have struggled with the burden of power, with the isolation it brings, with the way it dehumanizes and alienates. Some have handled it better than you did. Others have handled it worse, becoming tyrants or You fell somewhere in the middle, neither hero nor villain but something more tragic, a man destroyed by the very position that was supposed to make him godlike. The sun sets on the Wanli era, on your long and troubled reign, on your complicated and ultimately sad life. The Forbidden City will continue to stand for centuries more, though it will serve different masters, first Manchu emperors and eventually tourist hordes. The Dragon Throne will seat other men who will face their own challenges and failures. The empire will change and adapt and eventually transform into something entirely different from what it was during your time. But in 1620, as your body is lowered into the magnificent tomb you spent decades preparing, as the stone doors are sealed and the earth is piled above you, as the living world moves on without you, one thing is certain: you were the son of heaven, the ruler of all under heaven, the most powerful man in the world. And you were also the loneliest, the most trapped, the most profoundly isolated. You had everything, and you had nothing. You ruled the greatest empire on earth, and you ruled nothing at all. The gilded cage stands empty now, ready for the next prisoner. The rituals continue without you, performed for your successor and his successors. The system grinds on, indifferent to the individuals it consumes. And somewhere in the darkness of your tomb, surrounded by treasure and silence, lies the body of a man who was never allowed to be just a man who was made into a god, and found that godhood was the cruelest prison of all. This was your life as emperor in the Forbidden City. This was what it was really like. Not glorious, not triumphant, just lonely, just constrained, just endlessly, relentlessly crushing. You lived as the son of heaven. You died as a prisoner of paradise. And history will remember you not as you wished to be remembered, but as you truly were. A man who had everything and nothing, who ruled everywhere and nowhere, who spent a lifetime being the most important person in the world while slowly disappearing into irrelevance. The emperor is dead. The cage remains, golden and empty, waiting for the next soul to be locked inside. And the lesson, if there is one, is this: power without freedom is slavery. Wealth without choice is poverty. And divinity without humanity is the loneliest fate of all.